Hello and welcome back to the Elephant Lounge. I am your host Tuesday. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I am going to be picking up where I left off from the previous episode. If you have not listened to that, you should go ahead and do so that you're all caught up with where we are today. I am continuing to read an article from 2004 by Maureen Orth. This was published in Vanity Fair. It's very interesting to note the amount of information that we have here and what people knew and understood. I would please ask that you share this podcast if you could possibly share it on Twitter since I cannot. That would be awesome. Here we go. One of Jackson's closest business advisors who had met the family, that's the Arvizios at Neverland, told me he was 100% convinced they were out for money. I asked him how he could tell. How they react, he answered. They want to go shopping. Did he have any more specific reasons? He couldn't think of any. I mentioned that I had heard the family was allegedly videotaped, surveilled, held against their will at Neverland, and told they were being taken to Brazil. I had nothing to do with this, he replied. They did something, but it was not made by me. Okay, and then the next part of this article goes into talk about H. Russell Halpern. And this is the former attorney of the father, Gavin Arvizio's father. You can read that on your own. As always, I will link the article in the description, so you can go ahead and read that. I'm going to skip down to some more interesting parts of this article. Each time I report on a new, startling incident in the saga of Michael Jackson dangling his baby from a balcony in Germany in November 2002, forcing his two older children who appear to be Caucasian to wear veils or masks in public, appearing on 60 Minutes to deny having had sexual relations with a 13-year-old cancer patient, I find myself revisiting characters from the past. For example, Debbie Rowe, one of Jackson's two ex-wives who carried his first two children, got a lot of media attention in the wake of the baby dangling incident for praising the husband with whom she never lived. Quote, "He is a really wonderful, loving, caring man, and he's not portrayed as he really is, and it really pisses me off," unquote. Asked if she would have more children with Michael, she replied, "In a heartbeat." That made Ma Young-ho and So Young Lee laugh. She really put the fear of God in Michael, says Ma Young-ho, who claims Jackson confided in him. She is the woman who screamed and yelled and threatened to tell the world about Michael's dark secrets unless she got $8 to $10 million. He explains that, out of the blue in the summer of 1999, Rowe asked for a divorce and a huge sum of money or else. Michael said, "Give her whatever she wants. Get it done." Lee says that Rowe was a surrogate, not the biological mother. Her contact with Prince Michael I in Paris was limited to 8 times a year, and she purportedly saw them even less frequently. In a May 2000 memo from a lawyer handling the divorce case, after Rowe has asked for more visitations, including Mother's Day and alternate Christmas Eves, the lawyer is prompted to state, "The request for Mother's Day is a concern because Debbie now appears to be viewing herself as a mother. This is different from the image and position that she accepted in the past." Ma Young-ho Lee says, "It was so funny watching her in interviews on TV saying, 'I'll have another baby.' I'm thinking, yeah, that's another 10 million for you in a heartbeat." Rowe's lawyer declined to comment. Those of us who investigated the Jordy Chandler case also remember Norma Stakos. And I apologize, I might be pronouncing her last name wrong. It's Staikos. The duenna of Neverland, a stern caretaker who kept track of all the little boys' visits. And I have discussed her before in a prior episode. She disappeared the night before she was supposed to be questioned by the police in 1993. Lee, however, got yet another of the many surprises he experienced handling Jackson's business affairs. One day, a request came in from Greece where Stakos Coast was living for $75,000. Lee wanted to know what it was for and was told, "You don't understand, Lawyer Lee. Norma gets whatever she wants." According to So Young Lee, amounts of about $50,000 would be periodically sent to Greece for state coasts. I also learned that Bill Bray, the head of security at Neverland back in 1993, has been receiving $165,000 a year, and Jackson pays the gift tax. Amazing. I wonder how many of us, we have these old employers that just still pay us for no reason, I guess just out of the kindness of their heart. Nobody seems to wonder why Jackson is still paying certain members of his staff that no longer work for him. The person who probably knows more than anyone else about Jackson, according to Myung-Ho Lee, is his former chief of security and business advisor, Wayne Nagin, and that's Nagin, who was at his side for 22 years and then let go without severance 2 years ago. Wayne is not afraid to be called in to testify, says Lee. He's expecting it. He's the guy who knows everything. He's one of the very few who said no to Michael. Reports on boys who spent weekend after weekend with Michael in his bedroom while one or both of their parents, many of them estranged, stayed in separate guest houses, some well supplied with wine, continue to accrue. Now here's where I'm going to remind you. This is written in 2004. Jimmy Safechuck, for example, from Simi Valley, was described by one former Neverland manager as Michael's constant companion for 2 years. According to a report prepared for the Chandler case, for several years his parents received a new Mercedes annually from the King of Pop. Mrs. Safechuck declined to comment. Wade Robson, now a hot dancer choreographer, has admitted to sleeping in the same bed with Jackson, but has denied that anything sexual occurred. According to a former employee, in 1991, when Robson was 9, Jackson kept him overnight on the first night of one of his visits to the United States. Let me repeat that again. And mind you, this is written in 2004. And for all the supporters of this nasty plastic-faced pedophile who want to sit and call these victims liars and call Wade a liar, let me repeat this one more time so you get it through your thick head and your tiny mental midget mind. According to a former employee in 1991, when Robson was 9 years old, Jackson kept him overnight on the first night of one of his first visits to the United States. Period. End of story. There it is. So don't sit here and talk about how he went to Arizona or he did all this other No, he was with Michael Jackson. The boy's Australian parents were estranged. A former Jackson employee says the mother received a permanent resident visa to stay in the United States, and we know now that she was actually paid. She was actually given a salary by Jackson. Kat Pelicano told me she found a big garbage bag full of documents under the bed in the guest bedroom of her home. She said her former husband had forgotten his Jackson files from the Chandler case when he moved out. Kat showed me piles of papers relating to the case and gave me copies of documents that came from the office of Barry K. Rothman, Evan Chandler's first attorney. Rothman unsuccessfully sued Jackson for slander and defamation after he'd been accused of extortion when Pelicano was negotiating with him. Kat provided me with records of media calls Rothman received when the case broke wide open in late summer 1993. She even had a handwritten letter Evan Chandler had given to Rothman saying that if negotiations failed, he should go to the authorities. Lately, Geraldine Hughes, Rothman's legal secretary at the time, has been making the rounds on TV saying that Chandler was trying to frame Jackson. According to Roger Friedman's online column Fox 411, Hughes told Friedman she and her mother had visited Anthony Pelicano. In 1993, according to sources, Gary Hearn, Jackson Jackson's chauffeur testified he had delivered a black briefcase and a suitcase belonging to Jackson to Kat Pellicano. On Anthony's order, she says she accepted them, but she cannot remember what they contained. In a deposition for the case, Pellicano denied under oath having the briefcase and suitcase in his possession, and Kat Pellicano was also asked to testify about them to a Santa Barbara grand jury. She told me that her husband had cut a deal so that instead of her having to appear in person, she could testify on speakerphone from his lawyer's office. She said she had taken her cues from the lawyer, who would nod yes or no for her to answer. She said it was a farce. Last year, after a long, frustrating search, I managed to track down Jordy Chandler. I sent him a letter and left phone messages asking if he would talk to me about his life since 1994, when he collected $25 million from Michael Jackson. He never responded. Jackson's lawyers always claimed that Jordy's father, Evan, was an extortionist, and it had been widely reported that the greedy Chandlers took the money and ran. Ray Chandler, Evan's brother, who spoke with me extensively, says Evan put $20 million in trust for his son. The rest got distributed among his former wife June, the lawyers, and himself. Chandler always wanted to get money from Jackson, but initially he hoped to keep the case from going public. Ray says there was about a 2-month period between his brothers suspecting the relationship between Jackson and Jordy and the cases leaked to the media. During that time, Evan argued with Jordy's mother, who was being advised by Burt Fields in her custody dispute with Evan and resisting Evan's attempts to see Jordy. Ray Chandler says that his brother wanted to avoid the chaos he knew would ensue. He predicted a nightmare, but it was far worse than anything he could have imagined. Since 1993, Ray Chandler has gone to law school, familiarized himself with every aspect of the case. He is convinced that the way Fields and Pellicano handled Jordy's charges ruined Jackson's career. For Fields and Pellicano to think they could keep the lid on this, I'm not talking about before the case went public, but after it came out, for them to think what was best for Michael Jackson was not to settle but to whip up the media and claim extortion was an absurdity. It floored Larry Feldman. To make matters worse, says Chandler, Fields then files a complaint and goes into court and asks for a 6-year postponement on the civil case until the statute of limitations runs out on criminal charges, and says if Michael doesn't get it, Michael will have to take the 5th. Ray Chandler was at his brother's side from the beginning. A few hours after Evan says he got attacked by an unknown cameraman in the lobby of the building where his dentist's office was, Ray tells me he chased down a disturbed female fan of Jackson's who had flown over from England to make death threats to the family, and who even cleared the front door of Jordy's house. Boy, oh boy. So there were psycho fans from England even back then. Color me shocked that a psychotic Michael Jackson fan would come over from England and harass the victims. And this is the mentality of a Michael Jackson fan. This is their mentality. Just absolutely insane. Michael was everything to her, says Ray Chandler, who called the police, after which the woman was deported. Once Jordy and the housekeeper were nearly run down by a car, which then also came at them in reverse. There were other terrorizing tactics which the family suspected but could not prove Anthony Pellicano was behind. At the time, Pellicano's lawyer would not respond. Recently, Jackson's sister LaToya appeared on Christina, the Spanish-language TV show, said that Michael had an album to finish and he settled the case and paid the millions so he could record in peace. The truth, however, is a little more nuanced. After negotiations broke down, Jordy was sent to a psychiatrist who pronounced his story of sexual molestation credible and submitted a mandatory report of it to the DCFS. The report was immediately leaked for money to the tabloids, and the media had a field day. According to the family, however, they were willing to testify at the time they settled the civil case in January 1994, but the prosecutors were not prepared to charge Jackson until May, and by then, the family was too scared to proceed. In December, a spokesperson for the LA County District Attorney's Office said the authorities had not found the family's allegations of intimidation credible, but earlier last year, one of the prosecutors on the case told me that police had investigated the family's concerns and concluded they were true. By then, the authorities had found a book with nude pictures of young boys in Jackson's bedroom at the Jackson family home and had located 2 other boys who could perhaps have been persuaded to testify, but because they didn't charge Jackson, they weren't able to subpoena witnesses except through a grand jury, which seriously hampered investigations. Last April, I reported in this magazine that prosecutors were spooked by Jackson's celebrity back then and did not believe they could go up against him with Jordy alone. In the end, the Chandlers demanded witness protection before they would testify, and it could not be worked out. Had the DA acted quicker before they got so scared, they would have had them without witness protection, Ray Chandler tells me. A source close to the prosecution disagrees. I think we got played by Feldman and the Chandlers. Jordy was always on the fence. Feldman responds, "Where were they for a year? I found them the maid, Blanca Francia, Jackson's personal maid, and brought them her testimony, and her son was allegedly molested." Jordy Chandler has graduated from college, and today he manages his own money but does not work. He is haunted by his early experience. Despite the fact he's got a lot of money, Ray Chandler says, he'll always be the Michael Jackson kid. It's a heavy weight to tote around. He says Jordy has had to start his life over at least 3 times. Whenever he starts with a new social group, someone figures it out and he can't stay in the group because people continue to talk about it. How much money did you get? Did he do it? Even in Germany, he was accosted by a stranger in the street yelling, "You're Jordy Chandler." Once he received an email through a brand new account, "We know who you are." Jordy, who underwent extensive therapy at the time the relationship was discovered, has not spoken to his mother since the ordeal. And obviously we learn later that he is in contact with his mother now. He blames her for putting him in harm's way. Evan Chandler has become a total recluse, estranged from his family except for Jordy. It's been psychologically devastating for him, Ray Chandler says. In the last half of 1993, he felt himself to be the most viled man in the world, he adds. Michael did break up this family. Michael doesn't seem to get close to children from solid 2-parent homes. Well, of course not, because a solid home would not allow a grown man to continually sleep in a bed with their child. Ironically, Jordy Chandler is the tantalizing specter hovering over the current case. In order to establish a defendant's character, California law makes admissible prior allegations demonstrating the defendant's propensity to commit molestation. Therefore, Sneeden can subpoena Jordy Chandler to testify against Jackson today. If he refuses, he can be found in contempt of court but not jailed. In 1993, Jordy was interviewed 8 or 9 times by authorities who probed him for inconsistencies to see if he would make a credible witness. He reportedly never wavered in his story. A judge must decide whether Jordy, any other alleged victims, or anyone who gave a deposition about witnessing prior bad acts can be called to the stand. All of these witnesses could be cross-examined as to their motives in making their original charges. Subpoenaing any or all of them, therefore, may be a tough call for Sneeden to make. According to Ray Chandler, if Jordy were to testify today, he'd be a real hero for life. He should come out because this boy is sick. He's brave and he needs help. If Michael's acquitted, people will look back in 1993 and say that was a hoax too. Then Jordy and Evan will be in a much worse position than now. Feldman says Sneeden has already contacted Jordy Chandler about testifying. From their nicknames for each other, Doo-Doo Head, Applehead, and Rubba, Jackson and Jordy Chandler appear to have an extremely intimate relationship back when Jackson was 35 and Jordy was 13. So what ended up happening is, if we go back and we look at the settlement, they are not allowed to testify. Jordy, any of the Chandlers, they were not allowed to testify. But June Chandler ended up agreeing to testify, putting her in breach of the contract that she had signed back in 93. I don't know if anything ever came about that, because the result, or if anyone were to ever be in breach of the contract, it was written in there that they would go into arbitration, and that arbitration would be in secret or in private. So we have no idea whether Jackson did manage to bring June back to arbitration or not. Nobody actually has a solid answer for that. But that's what happened there. And I don't think Jordy wanted to testify. He wanted his mother to testify, because he had put a lot of this on her. As far as his father, Evan, we know that Evan was extremely ill by this time. He was unable to make it out to testify. Even if he wanted to, he was just unable to do so. Jackson's celebrity and his powers of seduction are not to be easily discounted. My Young Ho Lee says he has seen Jackson meet presidents of countries, CEOs, and billionaires, very worldly people, and he never fails to impress. People are in awe of Michael Jackson because he's Michael Jackson. If they are so impressed, you don't think Michael can't charm a 13-year-old? A prosecution insider from the Chandler case adds, so many of the boys enjoyed their relationships. They didn't feel like victims. They were showered with gifts. They got very, very special treatment. At that age, a kid's sense of his own sexuality is just starting to develop. To our knowledge, it was never a forcible situation. It was more of an exploration. For a guy like Michael Jackson to say, I love you, you're catching kids at a very vulnerable age, and they can't even fully process what's going on. As they get older, it hits. And what more is there to add? I mean, that right there sums it all up. When you are a child and you have this celebrity that's larger than life, that you admire, that you look up to, someone like Wade, who he's dancing, his whole persona, everything that he's doing is based upon this man who's larger than life, that's his hero, taking him to places, VIP treatment everywhere, and he's telling this young boy, I love you. You're special to me. We're expressing our love. I'm going to buy you whatever you want. I'm going to buy your parents things. Maybe they did know something was weird or not normal because they were told not to say something. They were told not to say anything to anybody else. But at the same time, here they are with Michael Jackson. Okay, I'll keep it a secret. It's very hard for somebody who enjoys their relationship to somehow then accept that this is abuse. It absolutely kills me that there are Michael Jackson supporters who do not seem to understand that that is going to take a very, very long time to process. It is a very, very long time to process. And even if, for instance, Wade at 23, when he testified, knew what Michael Jackson did was wrong, okay? Because that's why he's testifying at this trial. And you've never known something was wrong to do, but you did it anyway. This idea that Michael Jackson fans have that Wade was supposed to know everything and he should have already figured out that something was wrong or this was wrong. What you're not factoring in and what you're not attempting to understand is that Wade, just like James, just like every other child that was a victim of Michael Jackson's, they feel special. They feel as though they can handle it. Nothing really happened to them. It's not that big of a deal. We can put it past, I can put it past me. Part of the reason why I think this did disturb Wade is that he did make that choice to testify. He did essentially call this boy a liar. It takes years to process this and to deal with it. And some people never do. And shame on you. Shame on you for calling them liars and expecting them to process all of this when it's people like you who can't even recognize what has happened. You can't even recognize that it's happened. You can't even see the obvious of what so many of us see because it was dangled in our faces, literally dangled in our faces. And yet, at the same time, you expect James and Wade to act like perfect victims, that somehow they should have said something back then, or they should have said something when you demand for them to say it. It's absolutely bizarre. After all the demonstrations of support for Jackson and all the brouhaha on cable TV are over, this case will come down to whether or not a jury believes the current boy and his family are telling the truth and how the jury assesses their motives. Larry Feldman, described by Mark Geragos as the money lawyer the family sought out, says he is convinced that money is not the motive. If it were, he believes the family would now be taking a different course of action. Either this family set me up and slowly hooked me in, or it's the truth, he tells me. Over the years, Feldman says he has gotten numerous calls alleging abuse on the part of Jackson, but since 1994, he is more cynical than gullible, so he has turned all the others down. Do you think the mother wakes up one day and says, "We're going to take Michael Jackson to the cleaners"? How bad could a mother be to do this to her child who is in danger of dying of cancer? And she is doing it through the DA and not through me, because if this child dies of cancer before Jackson is in a civil suit before a judge, there is no recovery whatsoever. If he dies, she could not even bring a suit even if Michael is convicted. Feldman concludes that his answer on the money motive is 100% no. William Dickerson agrees. I believe the things the family told me. It was critically examined many times in many different ways by qualified professionals. It was consistent. It's too rich a fabric of facts, allegations, and circumstances. You can't possibly be consistent and be lying. The trial may not get underway for a year, which was true because the trial was in 2005. In the meantime, as Jackson's flaunting of the rules at his arraignment on January 16th and the party at Neverland that followed so clearly illustrated, the media circus has only just begun. How incredible was that? How incredible was it that Jimmy Safechuck and Wade Robson are in this article, and yet the Jackson team wants you to believe that Jimmy Safechuck was a non-entity. A non-entity how? It just goes to show the courts knew about what was going on. They knew who his victims were over and over and over. How many more examples do you people need? And half of these people that are still sticking by Michael Jackson, they're getting paid. And it wouldn't surprise me if the estate ends up just losing their money. I don't know how the Jacksons have managed to hang on to money after all these years. But anyway, shame on Michael Jackson fans. Shame on you for calling these boys liars. Shame on you for not dealing with reality. It drives me insane. And then to come on to my podcast and call me ignorant. No, it doesn't work that way. It's not going to work that way. You're not going to come here and tell me how much you know and post your links to this stupid supporter blog. I'm not listening to it. I've listened to it for over 10 years now. The lies that the Michael Jackson supporters put out. For a while, I believed them. I did. I believed them, but I wasn't following closely enough. And now that I am, and now that I have, it is a different story. I am absolutely disgusted by the people who are still out there, who still don't get it. And this idea that the judge threw out their cases and called them a liar and said no fact-finding jury and blah, blah, blah. No. If you actually read the decision, if you actually took the time to read the decision, you would know that the judge is talking about liability, who is responsible. And it states because it was demonstrated to the court that Michael Jackson was fully in charge of all of the decisions decisions and nobody was above him, a court could not reasonably find that the estate was responsible. It is up to James and Wade to prove that there were decisions that were made that went beyond the control of Michael Jackson, or that somehow they had some type of responsibility over that of Michael Jackson as the individual. That is what the decision is talking about. It is specifically talking about how the court would find responsibility as it pertains to the estate. It does not call Wade or James liars. Nowhere has any judge called Wade or James a liar. Nowhere has any judge commented on the merits of the lawsuit, other than to say they did not feel that the estate would be responsible, and it is past the statute of limitation. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what other information can be worked out or how else they're going to proceed. I don't know. I hope they are able to find a loophole or find something that helps them. Who knows? Maybe some more victims will come out, and maybe that's what's needed. Maybe some people need to get some stuff put in the past, come forward and talk about what happened to them, because we know you're out there. For all of the victims of Michael Jackson, we know you're out there. Yes, you have a right to be silent, but you also have a right to come forward and be believed. And now these fans are apparently taking HBO, I want to say, to court in France because they sullied the name of Michael Jackson. Is this a joke? They're suing for $1. It's the principle of the matter, all this other nonsense. You cannot tarnish the character of a man who was a pedophile. If anybody is responsible for tarnishing the character of Michael Jackson, it's Michael Jackson. This isn't hard to figure out. He did it to himself. Wake up. These people are just wasting time, wasting everybody's time because they're too stupid to put some information together. This is not hard to figure out. This is a grown man in his sexual prime. He's obviously sexual. Nobody can deny that. The man grabbed his crotch every 5 seconds. Any performance that you see with this man, he's grabbing his crotch. And he's always got a kid next to him. All the damn time. He has had multiple children, multiple people come forward and say, hey, dude, the guy touched me. He put his mouth on my penis. Over and over and over. And what do these fans do? Oh no, they close their eyes, they look the other way, and they blame the victim, and they call them the liars, and they talk about how everybody wants Michael's money. The only person to blame for all of this is Michael himself. And he treated everybody like garbage. It wasn't just the children. It wasn't just their families. It was everybody. He has one damn problem after the other. One damn litigation after the next. And you know what? Yes, there are people out there that go after celebrities. There are people that lie on people. I understand that. It happens. It does happen. It probably happens more than we even know about. I get that. I understand that. But in a lot of those cases, they fall apart. And they fall apart quickly because they're just not true. They go away after a while. You can tell that the person making the accusation actually does have a motive. They have an easily discoverable motive. Or they're crazy. And yes, there are literal crazy people out there. I understand that. But here's the deal. Jackson was accused officially in 1993. Let's go over this. Again, he was officially accused in 1993. From what we know and what we've read and what I've gone over on this series of podcasts that I have done, there were prior complaints. There just wasn't enough evidence. There wasn't enough proof. There wasn't enough this or that. But there was definitely something going on with Michael Jackson and little boys for quite some time. He gets this official complaint in 1993. Now, if you're an innocent man and you have done nothing wrong and you see how your behavior is getting you into trouble, how people are accusing you of being a pedophile. They're making these accusations. You just paid $20 million out to that young boy. Then we have Jason Francia. You pay another couple million out. And you're being told, look, somebody had to have told him sleeping in bed with little boys is not okay. He had to put that together. Somebody had to have put together the thought process that, wait a minute, I am sleeping in bed with little boys. Maybe this doesn't look good. Maybe I shouldn't do it. That way it'll keep me out of trouble. And I don't want to be spending all this money for something that I didn't do. You would immediately take away the ambiguity. And that's why you can't be sleeping in bed with little kids, especially little kids that are not your own. There is a buffer zone there that protects children. And for anybody out there to be advocating and acting like, oh, it's okay. No, it's not okay. That's the one thing that protects your child. And don't be so stupid as to think just because he's a celebrity and he spins around and he goes, hoo-hoo, hee-hee. Just because he does these things does not mean he is immune from being a pedophile. It makes him more of a likely candidate for being a pedophile. I probably shouldn't get so worked up, but there are just some people you just want to shake. You just want to shake them because it gets to a point where you're sitting there thinking to yourself, what more do you need? What more information is going to satisfy you to know and understand that the man was a pedophile? It's so obvious. I really don't even think a videotape at this point would convince anybody that's a fan. If you're still a fan of Michael Jackson, you still haven't figured it out, I really doubt you'll ever figure it out. So I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing I can tell you. I give up. If you really, really cannot see it and how obvious this is, then you need to go somewhere else. You need to go somewhere else. And I will be back